So, good morning. I'll bring up the prayer book. Good to see everybody. I know it's a holiday weekend today, so I'm happy to see you here. So, as we're starting, I just want to remember to announce that next Saturday is our in-person event at Goranson Farm. It should be a lot of fun. We'll have a tour of the farm and then a guided meditation on the earth and sentient beings. They're little chicks, so they're the baby chickens, and Maureen, who is a very regular at our Tuesday, Thursday meditation, is having her chef Alex prepare things from the farm. So at the moment, very small bite-sized things, lavender muffins, strawberry ice cream, duck egg quiche, and a skewer of vegetables. So she's really, having a big, warm, open invitation. And after the meditation, we'll do seated meditation. We'll do some walking meditation. She's created a labyrinth there as well. And then there'll be time for you to go to individual plants and special areas of the farm. So it was a lot of fun last year, and it looks like it's going to be even more fun this year. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. May I quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I reach enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. As earth and the other elements, together with space, eternally provide sustenance in many ways for the countless sentient beings, so may I become sustenance in every way for sentient beings to the limits of space until all have attained nirvana. As the Sugatas of old gave birth to the bodhicitta and progressively established themselves in the training of a bodhisattva, so I too, for the benefit of beings, shall give birth to that bodhicitta and progressively train myself in that discipline. At this moment, my life has become fruitful. I have realized my human life. Today, I am born into the family of the Buddhas. Now I am a child of the Buddhas. From now on, I will forthrightly perform the actions befitting my family. I will act so as not to degrade the faultlessness and discipline of my family. Just as with a blind man finding a jewel in a heap of dust, thus somehow bodhicitta has been born in me. This is the supreme Amrita which destroys death, the inexhaustible treasure which removes the world's poverty. It is the supreme medicine which cures the world's sickness, the tree which provides rest for beings weary of wandering on the paths of existence. It is the universal bridge on which all travelers may pass over the lower realms, the rising moon of mind which dispels the torment of the kleshas. It is the great sun which puts an end to the obscurity of ignorance, the pure butter which comes of churning the milk of the holy Dharma. For travelers wandering the paths of existence, seeking happiness from objects of enjoyment, it is supreme bliss near at hand, the great feast which satisfies sentient beings. Today, witnessed by all the protectors, I have welcomed the sentient beings and Sugatas, Devas, and Asuras rejoice. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So we are delightfully studying Lojong, the 7 points of mind training. This morning we have reached a new section. We are now in section 6. So I'm going to put the slogan 23 and the description of section 6 in the chat room, and I'll read it as well for those who are viewing afterwards. Oh, Annie is asking, is there a problem with volume? No, my volume is on high. So it may be just you, Annie. Okay, so point 6, we've looked at the views that we're holding. We've been looking at many different components. Point 6 is the disciplines, commitments, or how to abide in mind training. Always abide by the 3 basic principles: dedication to your practice, refraining from outrageous conduct, and developing patience. And today I'm going to really just speak about the first one, dedication to your practice. Again, marvelously, every little word in these slogans is just volumes of teaching. So when we say always abide by the 3 basic principles, first, dedication to your practice, essentially that means commitments to your vows. So we haven't talked a lot about the commitments. Most of you have taken refuge in bodhisattva vows, and when you take refuge, you can take with refuge precepts, or you can take one precept of the 5 lay vows, or you can take a general refuge and begin to study the Dharma, readying yourself for the first 5 precepts. If we were to say very simply, what does the refuge vow entail and what does the bodhisattva vow entail, we could just quote the Buddha from the Dharmapada: not committing any evil deeds whatsoever, practicing virtue completely, one's mind is completely tamed. And I think we want to be we want to see that we are looking at things from the perspective of the Dharma. And we may have inherited very Puritan views about dogma related to vows. We may be using the English word vow and associating Helen Brimstone's kinds of childhood education. And often the language we use in English doesn't totally reflect what the philosophical view and intention is trying to be transmitted. So essentially, when we see that we are suffering, when we see that we have the potential to be free from suffering, to have a realization that benefits ourselves and others, and releases us or liberates us from suffering, then of course we want to know how to do that. What are the steps? How can we learn about it? So we engage in training, and as we engage in training, we start to see the causes of our suffering more clearly. The causes of our suffering in gradations. And so we can see how we harm ourselves and how we harm others. And so then we become ready with our increased clear seeing, increased wisdom to say, I don't want to engage in behaviors anymore that harm myself and others. So I will make a clear statement to myself and to the Buddha, and even best if we're in a refuge ceremony with the representatives of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. But essentially, it's a commitment to ourselves not to engage in those behaviors. So let's go back to first refuge and then precepts along with refuge. So when we're at that moment of taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, we're taking refuge in the realization that the Buddha had, that's embodied by support of seeing the great masters, the great historical masters, the body of works of the Dharma, and the Sangha that is beyond falling back into confused thoughts and behaviors. So we see that there is a support to rely on until we gain that realization. And our responsibilities in taking refuge is to engage in training first and foremost, and to not harm others. And part of the first understanding of what does engaging in training, it means to remember throughout the day the supports. Remember that we are understanding what causes suffering, and there is a realization that the Buddha had that liberates us, that is liberating for ourselves and others. So we recall the qualities of the Buddha. The Dharma is what he spoke and what other enlightened beings spoke. And the Sangha, it's like being in AA and calling someone for support, calling on the Sangha for support. Then in our happiness and gratitude, not only are we recalling them, but we're making offerings in a joyous way, because we have been introduced to the path out of suffering. And I was thinking this morning as I was moving the flowers behind me, making an offering to Tara. Offerings can be simple. They can be lighting a candle when you're meditating. They can be offering flowers. And my personal favorite is offering flowers. But also it's easy to remember at the 3 meals, just to make a mental sense of offering to the 3 jewels before we eat ourselves. So we want to move towards liberation, so we want our mind on the supports more and more and more. So making offerings, recalling the 3 jewels to mind, and not harming others. Then if we are looking at how to abide in refuge, then that is really seeing for ourselves. It's not blind faith. It's coming to understand through our own training that this realization that we know the Buddha had and is our true potential, so our Buddha nature, not relying on other deities, or it's not saying that Buddhism isn't compatible with the other great religions. It's more, how do we understand that? If we are thinking of Christ consciousness, it's a realization. If we are thinking of embodying Christ, that is a understanding that that realization is our potential as well. So it's not dogma, it's understanding deeply what you're relying on and not forsaking that for a lesser truth. So there's a nuance to this understanding that really opens up non-sectarianism, because it is the realization and not seeing that as only outside, but the realization is within and is our potential. And so we engage in deeper understanding, deeper training, and then we see, okay, we're ready to work with the precepts. And really the precepts are the same in every culture. Not killing, not lying, not stealing, not sexual misconduct, and not confusing your mind with intoxicants so that you can't see the behaviors. What's interesting is, again, seeing these not as commandments, not like the 10 Commandments. It's more seeing, why has every culture made these basic ethics? It's because at the root, all of these behaviors are harming ourselves, causing suffering to us and others, and taking us away from our Buddha nature rather than towards our Buddha nature. And so really, when we're taking refuge in the biggest sense, and when we start to want to hold the precepts, it's because we are getting more courageous about looking honestly and transparently at ourselves, to see the habitual patterns that are covering our Buddha nature, to really see what is impeding us when we're choosing to act in ways that increase suffering for ourselves and others. And that we want to leave or become a refugee from those behaviors, from that illusory moment where we make a choice for our own benefit, safety, security, that has the effect of harming others. So if we look at what is underneath the behaviors, it's a holding tightly to some confused sense of, this will make me safe in this moment, make me comforted in this moment, is a better choice for me. So we see, okay, that is the opposite of where we want to go. And when we look at the Bodhisattva vow, we have an understanding of not being afraid of others, of opening our hearts and minds to the needs of others, not being so tightly held in our own self-absorption, but seeing the needs of others first as important as our own, and then less entranced by our own and more focused on the needs of others. And so when we look at the Bodhisattva vow, essentially the Bodhisattva vow and the refuge vow, really they're in the opening prayers. But the Bodhisattva vow is that first prayer that we do, may all sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me. We're saying, no matter what happens, we are not going to totally and completely forsake anyone. We're not going to forsake others. And we will accumulate training, adopt training, and train in all the levels of how we might benefit others. But the most important thing is not forsaking any sentient beings. And then as we're training in that, we learn more about how our heart can become bigger and what are the stages of our heart becoming bigger, and how to engage in those behaviors like visiting the sick. One day we'll go much more deeply into the Bodhisattva vow. And then in terms of not forsaking the Bodhisattva vow, what would forsake it would be forsaking the aspiration, harming bodhisattvas by disparaging them, and giving up our actions that establish others in virtue, or discouraging others from engaging in bodhisattva activities, and adopting wrong views. So again, they're not dogmatic. It's a clear way of seeing you're heading in the right direction. It's absolutely wonderful. What would close the doors of your heart? What would close the doors of that direction? And so always when we think of these commitments and holding fast to our practice, we also want to see the kindness and gentleness of particularly these first two vows as being always repairable. You can take refuge in front of a picture of the Buddha. Every single day we take refuge over and over again, so we're starting fresh. With the Bodhisattva vows, we can take that vow over and over again, starting fresh. And we can resolve to have at hand the wisdom of our training so that we can see when we are going down the road of habitual patterns, and we can pause in that moment, refrain from that behavior in the pause, bring to mind, often we think of Manjushri's blazing sword, so it's the light of that wisdom cutting the habitual pattern, not repressing it, but seeing we can make other choices. We can use the Dharma to rebalance, regain our clear seeing, and resolve that we are not going to allow confusion to hijack or overpower or destroy our bodhicitta in any moment, and change our behaviors. So it's not about in any way guilt. It's more seeing, oh honey, you're letting yourself down again. Let's remember, we want to stay true to the Buddha nature. So it's the clear seeing and honesty, and then making a renewed commitment with the light of our wisdom, and the light of our wisdom always teaching us that this is the doorway to liberating our own suffering and the doorway to bring everyone else along with us. So, really keep to the dharmic view of this, not as commandments and dogma, but Pema Chodron was expressing it as the bodhisattva is when you are so unafraid of looking at yourself that you can open your heart and invite everyone in. And really learn how, in both cases, we're learning how to come closer to abiding in our Buddha nature and seeing the confusion for what it is when it tries to hijack the Buddha nature. So, not allowing us to be afraid of ourselves and not allowing ourselves to be afraid of others. In essence, you can see that this instruction to hold fast to your practice could also be describing Tonglen. We're seeing the suffering that we have and letting go of it, and we're inviting in the suffering of others, giving the skills, the wisdom, sharing the Dharma, sharing the resources for those beings to be able to reach their full potential as well. So, a lot to think about just in this first training of holding fast to practice, holding fast to our understanding of refuge that's always expanding, holding fast to not only our altruistic motivation, but our bodhisattva intention of fulfilling the potential we have, and to have the courage not to forsake anyone from our hearts. Let's rest with that, and then we'll have a time for sharing. So I think there may be questions today. It's always interesting to really understand at the depth we want to understand what it means to make a commitment, um, and how we understand these vows and commitments. So I'd like to open it up to questions this morning.
Facebook Live is still on, Khenmo.
Oh, well, I think we can still have the question period. So I know we haven't really talked much in depth about um, the whole area of precepts. We've um, all engaged in the training, and I know you all are um, um, actively working in so many subtle areas of your mind to keep true to your Buddha nature. But when we talk about this particular quality of then making a resolve, and then in a ceremony working with taking precepts, how do you understand that, or do you have questions about that?
Hi, Khenmo, it's Eileen. The precepts, I think I sometimes just push them out of my mind because I'm continually failing. So I almost look at them like a guide, and I know that's not what they are, but because I do harm every day, um, I feel like I'm breaking them every day. So it's hard for me to use them sometimes as a way to grow spiritually in a deeper commitment. Do no harm, do not kill. Well, anytime you're stepping on a bug outside, you're killing. I'm allegedly vegan. I have been for a long time, but I'm also a sugar addict. So I have, during the pandemic, went nuts eating a lot of sugar, breaking what for me, is a commitment to not harm, the environment, animals, that kind of thing. And then every time that I do something, let's say I have a piece of cake. I mean, it sounds absurd, but for me, it is a breaking of a vow. So, I feel like I'm failing a lot in these vows. So I'm not sure what to say. It's
Yes, I do understand that, and that's exactly um, what um, what it's important to talk about. And so it's a it is very difficult to think that you're failing every day. Let's just say that. And so the vows are, or the precepts are presented in a way, we want to present them in a way that we can see that as a gradual, ever more forceful training. And so that's why there's a difference, let's say, than the refuge vow and the refuge precepts, or the bodhisattva vow and the bodhisattva precepts. So with the refuge vow, you're saying, I'm relying on taking refuge in this absolute that I can may not know right now, but I have a trust that there is a liberation from all of these levels of suffering. That samsara, it's going back to the Four Noble Truths, that there is suffering, we can see the cause of suffering, and there's a liberation from that suffering. And that liberation, that final liberation, is a consciousness that is beyond dualism, beyond I and thou. So the more you study, the more you investigate, the more that makes sense to you, then you can say, I can sincerely take refuge because I know what I'm taking refuge in. And I'm taking refuge in this clear seeing and this path out of suffering. And then we make, at a certain point in life, a commitment to the precepts, but it's um, mixed with this sense of um, inviolable 10 commandments that are associated with shame that you might have understood as a child. Um, and so it's not about that. It's seeing in the moment what's going on, and training more and more to move through that moment with choosing a different behavior, and then resolving to yourself each time um, uh, each time you're unable to hold the ideal that you wish to hold, to say, okay, I need to train more. I need to understand why this is hard with more and more subtlety, more and more depth. I need to rely on the Dharma in the sense of training, 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 getting closer to effectively pausing and then effectively not needing that behavior anymore to protect yourself, particularly in the sense of refuge. And so when we understand it that way, that there's an immediate um, confession to ourself, acknowledgement even to a photo, and um, with that kind of honesty and transparency, saying, I'm not seated in the Dharma strongly enough, so I commit to training again, as opposed to I've failed. And it's set up in this kind of system so that you can, you know, in our opening prayers that are with every single text we do, in your daily practice, you're retaking refuge. And in that short refuge prayer that we do, you're also retaking the Bodhisattva vow over and over and over. So in the moment of being imperfect, there's also the moment of retaking um, the aspiration, the commitment.
It's interesting that you're tying the two together, the refuge and the bodhisattva vows, because I think I'm so focused on the bodhisattva vow that I am not focused on the refuge vow. And I think I might have a little bit of a problem with refuge vow. So maybe that's the missing piece for me. I'm wondering if it's there's a lack of trust or something like that, if that makes any sense to you. And that could be coloring how I view, the precepts and everything else. Does that make sense?
It does make sense because the Bodhisattva vow comes from an understanding of the refuge vow.
Mm.
Um, you know, First we have to stop harming ourselves in order to benefit others. And so seeing our own suffering and the causes of our own suffering and the resulting behaviors from that suffering, then we refrain from harming ourselves and others, and then we move towards benefiting others.
I think I get that piece. I guess what I'm not getting, or don't, even though intellectually I get it, is Buddha nature, that I am Buddha, that I am it. So there's some sort of lack of connection with that, I think, on a deep level. So I think that's, since you're explaining it like that, I think that's maybe what it is. So anyway.
So that's really wonderful to identify. And we may take time after Lojong to go into that more deeply, because the the ground of Buddhism is that we all have the potential, that is the potential of all minds. and that it's not some outside deity, and it's not some better person you wish you could be. It's what's inherently there and what's covering what's there that we're working with.
Yeah.
And Peggy.
I think this aligns with what you're teaching, and it is that, well, first of all, I had to admit that I've always been too hard on myself. And I worked with that for quite a while. And, I'm still sometimes too hard on myself. But those times when I give into temptation of the thing that I had decided I wouldn't do, like that third or fourth cookie. the In more recent times, I look upon those times as that I'm self-sabotaging, which is an easier way. It's a little more kind to myself than saying, "Oh, why did you do that?" All those nasty things we say to ourselves. And if I look at it as self-sabotaging, then I can say, okay, what are my tools for avoiding sabotaging myself in the things I aspire for?
I think that's really important, and uh, it's noticing what are we really taking refuge in? Are we taking refuge in samsara, or are we taking refuge in our Buddha nature? So I was having, um, let's say, too many medical appointments in one day. So um, I went to a bakery and got a chocolate mousse cupcake. And, you know, I could see I was doing it. But now I have to really, really face, it's been a long history of me of working with chocolate addiction. Um, what is the root there that continually is the hijacking, and seeing that root, what can I, why is it that still has a hold? And so it becomes about curiosity and examination transparently with that curiosity, as opposed to I'm bad, I'm failing. Here we are. What exactly are we trusting, and then seeing that and understanding that. Oh, okay. We want to take it off Facebook. So, bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn may I rise, where it is born may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. So, thank you, Eileen and Peggy, for being transparent, because those were really crucial questions that I think are really shared by everyone. So Amy wanted to ask something, or Amy gave up.
No, Amy did not give up.
Okay.
I was just waiting for that. Thank you for that. Thanks for doing that. So taking, and let's see. So taking the Bodhisattva vow into the role as from a leadership role, as an organizer for a Dharma event, let's say, and then wisdom Dakini arises through a human being. That's where, for me, my discernment's coming in right now. And so wisdom Dakini looking like, in any tradition, it could be like the coyote person, the troublemaker, someone who brings something up. So I am taking this outside of myself for a moment, because I need perspective on this. from an organizational standpoint, when there is a person who comes into a situation and let's say, the issue that arose for me was creating doubt by attacking the teacher, let's say, okay? And often in my mind, I feel like, oh, this is good for us. This actually challenges our refuge. How deep rooted are we in the practice and not attached to the person? But from the view of seeing the individuals in the whole, we have varying degrees of refuge, you know, some are really deep rooted, others are just coming in and feeling like everything we're discussing right now, you know, from that individual standpoint. Do I eat the cupcake or do I not eat the cupcake? Do I know, you know, do I actually need a little bit more support right now from the cupcake to help me stabilize so that then I can meet the hardships of my life? Sometimes the cupcake is the refuge, you know, I mean, it's wonderful. But to have that discernment is really the root, you know, to have that discernment of when do I need the cupcake and when can I just let go of the cupcake and manage the suffering that's arising underneath that. So when you're in a role where you're making decisions for the whole, that's where I'm right now. I'm not trusting myself to make a decision. And I tend to go more towards like, I get scared. I'm like, oh, I don't want the people who are feeling less of the deeper ground to leave our group meeting because there's a challenging, fiery energy that just showed up and is like, you know, wreaking havoc on the Zoom. So from a bodhicitta vow, bodhisattva vow, you know, I'm feeling confused. So I'd like some support.
I think
And
restraining yourself from being a little specific. But let's just go back to refuge. When we take refuge, we're taking refuge in the Buddha's realization. We're not taking refuge in a person. And so when we are working with teachers, there is a whole range of realization in the teachers. And still, we're working with the realization that supports us to find our own realization. So that's just a basic. And then I think we're a lot more sophisticated now about addictions than we were in the past. And so being transparent and honest with oneself is saying, this situation is too much for me. Where am I going to choose to get support? Might we find support in the Sangha? Might we find support in the Dharma? Might we take one bite of the cupcake and not need the whole cupcake? You know, just why is it we are confusing the cupcake with something that's going to support us? And so it's a commitment to our Buddha nature, to each in our own life, to finding the root of our own confusion and engaging and working with it. Jeff, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, and sorry for being late. I got confused with the holiday weekend and kind of forgot it was Sunday, to be honest. So this just brings up, and I wasn't sure whether to say anything because I know we don't have a lot of time here, but hearing this discussion about cookies and all of this and sort of an addiction and, and like feeling helpless, it was, and then about the Buddha nature that we all have, it was reminding me of a framework that some people here might know of, and somebody just reminded me of again in the last week, which is the drama triangle. And Khenmo, I don't know if you're familiar with that. And it's almost like it's the opposite of the Dharma triangle. And in the drama triangle, it's sort of like we have all these parts within us, and it also comes out interpersonally when there's drama, which is victim, persecutor, and rescuer. And
Interesting.
And when we can actually accept that we have those in us, but shrink them, there's a picture, a graphic that I love because it shows the triangle, and there's a big circle at each node: victim, rescuer, persecutor. And when those circles are really big, there's no space left in the middle of the triangle. But when you shrink those circles down, what emerges at the center is love, or Buddha nature, that's always been there. And I guess just listening, I think, Peggy, it was you, I think, being very honest and vulnerable about, like, the 4 cookies. And it's like, I'm just thinking of, like, when we feel helpless, it's like that's when we're in the victim mode. I can't help it. The world is doing this. And then we start doing our persecutor and shaming ourselves, like, oh, I'm so bad, I'm eating these cookies. And when we can just sort of recognize that and shrink those circles, it's like, okay, then the Buddha nature comes through. And do we eat the cookie? I don't know. But I love that framework. It's really been helpful to me.
It is a great framework, and I would change it from Dharma framework or Dharma triangle to Samsara triangle, because that's
Well,
exactly,
it's actually called drama triangle.
yeah. So I would change it to Samsara triangle.
Oh, samsara, yes.
Yeah. And so we see the cycle of samsara repeating itself over and over again, and we look for the way out. And so then we see taking refuge precepts, taking bodhisattva vow, and learning about the precepts. That's the door out. Really understanding them. So we will go more into this, and we might use this as one of the next areas of study, but I'll see if I can bring it into this ongoing 6th point and 7th point. And fairly quickly, Ginny has a wonderful story to take us out, a nice inspiring story about a bodhicitta operating in a family that she wanted to share today. You have to unmute, Ginny.
Okay. A very dear friend of mine, I went to Tibet with Ellie, and Khenmo knows her pretty well, has a daughter who is married to a lovely man who was diagnosed last year with ALS. And the doctor took Amy aside and said, "You're going to be a widow in 2 years." So the whole family has been aware of this, and David was last year at this time, he was the head of a school in west of Portland. Anyway, he's now in a wheelchair, and one of his life dreams has been to go to the Alps. And his wife said, "Okay, you're in a wheelchair now. I'm afraid to take you." So the 2 nieces and nephew left their job, raised the money, and they have taken him, David, to, I thought I had a picture. Yeah, you can, I don't know if you can see this, but I don't know. I don't think it'll show, but I have I was sent yesterday a picture of David in a wheelchair in the Alps. And next to him were his nephew and niece, who told his wife they would go and make sure they would take care of the wheelchair. So the three of them sent me a picture of David in the Alps. And the whole story that this family is going through right now, they have two teenage sons, and David is preparing to die. His wife is preparing to die, and it's so real to me. It's not how to prepare for death on a piece of paper. It's how do you prepare for death when a vibrant 50-year-old man is dying? And I don't know them that well, but I'm sharing their story with them. And I guess I'll say it's beyond the teaching for me. And I just wanted to share with you this story because for me, for what this family and the friends of this man are doing, their story of incredible love and compassion. And this family couldn't get along without it. I wish I could show you the story of there's a picture of David in the wheelchair. But it won't. But I have a picture of David in a wheelchair, who I have right up on my altar, because how can I, Khenmo, with the power of intention that you taught me 20 years ago, work with his family?
I'm gonna see if I can bring it up on my screen, because it really is just so lovely. It's not just, it's not a city. It's on the top of the mountain in that they were able to get. So we can talk more about that, Ginny, and I have no doubt with your big heart that you're going to be a big support to the family and especially to Ellie. So it is past our time, but I thought the thought of that wonderful family would be a bright spot. So we have dedication prayers, and really just remember what we have always said, just keep an open mind. We're undoing habits of thinking and habits of behavior for lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes, not only in just this life. So the complexity of that, we're gentle with ourselves in our honesty, and appreciative of a system that doesn't expect perfection, but says every day, every 10 minutes, take refuge. Every day, every 10 minutes, repeat the Bodhisattva vow. The training and commitment is a continuous moment to moment. In the same way, the confused mind is moment to moment. By this virtue may I achieve omniscience, and may all who travel on the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn may it arise, where it is born may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. For this realm, encircled by snow-covered mountains, you are the source of every benefit and bliss without exception. Tenzin Gyatso, you who are one with Avalokiteshvara, may you remain steadfast until samsara's end. Embodiment of the three precious jewels, Padmapani, who holds the teachings of the victorious one, seeing the all-goodness meaning with the wisdom eye, may you who are spontaneously established activities live long for hundreds of kalpas. Noble Manjushri, the Lord of Speech, who manifests to hold the teachings of the Triple Gem, who raises the lamp of the sage's teachings, may you who are the light of the Dharma live long for hundreds of kalpas. The one known in the Holy Land as Aryadeva, emanated into the Gar clan of eastern Tibet as Chodingpa, the heart son of Jigten Sumgun, may the life of glorious Garchen remain steadfast for 100 eons. So I'm just checking that all the chat things were acknowledged, and thank you. It's a holiday weekend. It's Liberation. Liberation Day. The American version of Liberation Day. So keep our commitment to abiding in the Dharma mind, and see you next week and or next Sunday. And if you're in the driving distance of Scarborough, Maine, all the information for the in-person meditation is on our website.
Thanks,
Thank
Khenmo.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Khenmo, do you have any sense of how long that event will last for, just so I can plan for my work in the evening?
Yeah, it's scheduled for 3 hours, but if you have to come and go,
Okay,
you can
just-
stick around.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Maureen said there's just so much there. She didn't want to make it too short.
Okay.
Her knowledge of plants is just extraordinary. Yeah, you had a question, Jeff?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I was really hoping to make it to that, but I'm down in DC and I don't think I'll be back for a couple of weeks. So, but
Well,
it's wonderful.
thank you for your good work down in DC.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I'm trying. All right.
Bye for now.
Bye all.
Bye.